The cardboard boxes sat like tombstones in the empty Brooklyn apartment, each one a marker of a life that had crumbled piece by piece. Catherine Morrison, Kate to everyone who knew her, folded the last of Grace's school clothes into a suitcase, her hands moving with the mechanical precision of someone who had learned to function while her heart was breaking. 6 months ago, David had walked out of their 8-year marriage with nothing but a gym bag and a stammered explanation about finding himself with Rebecca, the 24-year-old blonde from his accounting firm. 3 weeks ago, the Jefferson Public Library, Kate's professional home for 8 years, had closed its doors forever, another casualty of budget cuts that valued efficiency over the quiet sanctuary books provided to people like her. Grace sat cross-legged in the corner with Duke, their 11-year-old golden retriever whose graying muzzle and arthritic joints made him the most honest member of their fractured family. At 10 years old, Grace possessed the unsettling wisdom of a child forced to grow up too quickly, watching her parents' marriage dissolve in whispered arguments in slammed doors. "Mama, where are we going to live now?" Grace's voice carried the tremor of someone too young to understand that sometimes adults had no answers. Kate knelt beside her daughter, smoothing the chestnut hair that mirrored her own. The rent notice on the kitchen counter gave them 2 weeks, but her savings account balance suggested they had considerably less time than that. Every job application had yielded the same polite rejection: overqualified, underexperienced in digital systems, too expensive for their budget. The sound of mail sliding through the apartment's slot interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Among the bills and final notices lay an envelope that seemed to belong to a different era: cream-colored paper, gold-embossed seal, Kate's full name written in elegant script across the front. Her hands trembled as she broke the wax seal. The letterhead read, "Whitman and Associates, Attorneys at Law," followed by words that made her read the page 3 times before the meaning penetrated her exhausted mind. "We regret to inform you of the passing of Miss Evelyn Thornfield. As per her last will and testament, you have been named sole beneficiary of the Thornfield property located at Willowbrook Mountain, Virginia." Kate's breath caught. Evelyn Thornfield. The name meant nothing to her, yet this stranger had left her an entire property. Her father, Thomas Morrison, had died of a heart attack when Kate was 16, taking with him any family history he might have shared. Her mother had passed 2 years later, leaving Kate with more questions than answers about their quiet, reserved family tree. Grace peered over her mother's shoulder, squinting at the formal language. "Does this mean we're not homeless?" Kate folded the letter carefully, a strange, tingling sensation spreading through her chest. Not quite hope, but something resembling possibility. "I think it means we have somewhere to go, sweetheart." Have you ever received unexpected news that completely changed your life? Maybe an inheritance, a job offer, or even a letter from someone you'd forgotten. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you're enjoying Kate's journey so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We have so many more incredible true stories coming your way. The drive to Virginia stretched 6 hours through landscapes that shifted like scenes in a movie Kate had never watched. Brooklyn's concrete and steel gave way to suburban sprawl, then rolling farmland, and finally the ancient mountains of Virginia that rose like sleeping giants against the October sky. Her Honda Civic, reliable but tired, climbed winding roads where cell phone towers became sparse and GPS signals flickered like dying candles. Grace pressed her nose to the window, watching civilization fade into something wilder, more mysterious. "It's like we're driving into a fairy tale," she whispered, and Kate felt an unexpected shiver of agreement. The deeper they traveled into these mountains, the more it felt like they were crossing into a different world entirely. The GPS died completely as they turned onto a narrow mountain road marked only by a weathered sign: Willowbrook Mountain, 12 miles. The asphalt gave way to gravel, then to dirt that wound upward through forests so dense they seemed to swallow sound itself. Kate's knuckles went white on the steering wheel as the road narrowed, branches scraping against her windows like gnarled fingers, testing their resolve. The explosion came without warning, a sound like a gunshot followed by the sickening lurch of the car pulling hard to the right. Steam erupted from beneath the hood as Kate wrestled the vehicle to a stop on what might generously be called the road shoulder. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel, feeling the last of her composure crack like ice under pressure. Of course this would happen now, miles from civilization, with their entire future balanced on the thread of a stranger's inheritance. Her roadside assistance had lapsed months ago, another casualty of their financial freefall. Grace's small hand found her shoulder. "It's okay, Mama. We're adventure partners now, remember?" Before Kate could respond to her daughter's forced optimism, headlights appeared through the gathering dusk like a miracle she was afraid to believe in. An old Ford pickup truck slowed, then stopped alongside their disabled Honda. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a face that seemed carved from the mountain itself. Lined with experience rather than just age, with eyes the color of winter sky. The man appeared to be in his early 70s, wearing a flannel shirt and baseball cap that had seen better decades. When he spoke, his voice carried the gentle authority of someone accustomed to emergencies. "You ladies having car trouble?" Kate hesitated, city caution warring with desperate necessity. But something in his manner, the way he waited patiently for her answer, the absence of any predatory assessment in his gaze, made her decision. "The engine overheated, I think. We're trying to get to Willowbrook Mountain." The man's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "Willowbrook Mountain. That's Evelyn Thornfield's place." He studied Kate's face with new intensity. "You must be the granddaughter she mentioned." "You knew Evelyn." "Samuel Garrett," he said, touching the brim of his cap. "Sam. And yes, I knew Evelyn better than most. Been wondering when you'd show up." The casual way he said it sent another chill down Kate's spine. Had Evelyn been expecting her? How could a woman Kate had never heard of have known enough about her circumstances to time an inheritance so precisely? Sam emerged from his truck, moving with the careful efficiency of someone whose body had seen hard use, but whose mind remained sharp. "That Honda won't make it up the mountain trail anyway. Why don't I give you folks a ride? We can figure out your car situation once you've seen what you've inherited." The drive up the mountain in Sam's truck revealed a landscape both beautiful and forbidding. Ancient trees pressed close on either side, their branches forming a canopy so thick that twilight arrived early in their shadow. The road, if it could be called that, consisted of twin ruts carved by decades of careful navigation through terrain that seemed to actively discourage visitors. "Did you know my grandmother well?" Kate asked, testing the unfamiliar word. Sam's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Evelyn Thornfield was complicated. The folks in town called her the Witch of Willowbrook Mountain, though not many would say it to her face. They had their reasons for keeping their distance." "What kind of reasons?" Sam was quiet for so long, Kate thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, as they rounded a curve that revealed a vista of rolling mountains, disappearing into the distance, he spoke. 60 years ago, there was a flood down in the valley. Worst natural disaster this county ever saw. 6 people died, hundreds lost everything they had. The relief fund raised over $120,000, a fortune back then, to help folks rebuild. He paused, navigating around a fallen branch. Evelyn was the fund's treasurer. When the money disappeared, so did she. Most folks figured she'd stolen it and run off to live high somewhere else. They never forgave her for that. Grace leaned forward from the back seat. "But she didn't really steal it, did she?" Sam's eyes met Grace's in the rearview mirror, and Kate saw something like approval in his expression. "You're a smart girl. No, she didn't steal it. But proving that, Well, that's been the problem all these years. The house emerged from the mountain mist like something from a half-remembered dream. Two stories of silver gray wood and native stone, it seemed to grow directly from the mountainside, as if the earth itself had decided to provide shelter. A wide porch wrapped around the front, supported by hand-hewn posts that spoke of craftsmanship from an earlier era. Behind the house, a cliff face rose like a protective wall, while ancient pine trees stood sentinel on either side. Kate stepped out of Sam's truck and felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of belonging. The air here carried scents unknown in Brooklyn: pine sap and wood smoke, mountain spring water, and the rich earthiness of forests that had never been clear-cut. Despite everything, the uncertainty, the fear, the complete disruption of their lives, she felt as if she had somehow come home. Evelyn built this place herself, Sam said, watching Kate's reaction. Well, had help with the heavy work, but she designed every inch of it. Said she wanted a house that would outlast whatever storms might come. Grace ran ahead with Duke, both of them energized by the space and freedom the mountain offered. Kate followed more slowly, her eyes taking in details that spoke of careful planning and quiet craftsmanship. The porch boards were solid despite their age. The windows gleamed despite their dust, and the massive front door opened at her touch as if it had been waiting for her hand. Inside, the house felt suspended in time. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, large enough to stand in, with a mantel that held photographs in simple wooden frames. Books lined built-in shelves, their titles revealing eclectic tastes. Thoreau next to Agatha Christie, Carson beside Mark Twain. A kitchen table sat near a window overlooking the valley. Two chairs pushed back as if their occupants had stepped away only moments before. But it was the photographs that stopped Kate cold. A young woman holding a baby, a man in military uniform, his face serious but kind, and there in the center, a picture of her father as a child, unmistakable despite the decades that separated the image from her memory. She kept track of family, Sam said quietly, appearing beside her, even when family didn't know she existed. Grace discovered a player piano in the corner, its ivory keys yellowed with age but still capable of producing music when she pressed them experimentally. The sound echoed through the house like laughter, breaking the reverent silence that had fallen over them. That first night, after Sam had shown them how to work the generator and pump water from the well, after he'd left with promises to return the next day, Kate sat in Evelyn's rocking chair by the window and tried to process the day's revelations. Grace slept peacefully upstairs, exhausted by adventure and fresh mountain air. Duke had claimed the hearth rug as his own, snoring contentedly for the first time in months. Kate moved through the house like a detective, touching surfaces and opening drawers, searching for clues about the woman who had left her this unexpected sanctuary. In the bedroom dresser, she found everyday items: reading glasses, a hairbrush with silver strands still tangled in its bristles, a small leather journal filled with pressed flowers. But it was the letter tucked inside the journal's back cover that made her hands tremble. Her own name was written on the envelope in the same elegant script as the legal documents. Inside, Evelyn's voice spoke across the years. "My dear Kate, if you are reading this, then fate has brought you home at last. I know you have questions about who I am and why I've left you this place. The truth is more complicated than lawyers' letters can convey, and more important than you might imagine. Your father, my Thomas, was the most precious thing in my life, and giving him up was the hardest decision I ever made. But sometimes love requires sacrifice that looks like abandonment to the outside world. Sometimes protecting those we love means accepting that we can never explain our choices to them. You will hear stories about me in town. Most of them are false. Some of them are true but incomplete. I leave it to you to decide what matters. The reputation I've carried all these years, or the reasons behind choices that cost me everything I held dear. There are things hidden in this house, Kate. Not just objects, but truths that powerful people have spent 60 years trying to bury. Whether you choose to uncover them depends on how much courage you've inherited from the Morrison line and from me. Welcome home, granddaughter. With love and hope, Evelyn. Kate read the letter 3 times before its implications fully settled in her mind. Evelyn wasn't some distant relative she'd never heard of. She was her father's mother, her grandmother, which meant everything Kate thought she knew about her family history was built on a foundation of secrets and sacrifice she was only beginning to understand. Morning came with golden light streaming through windows that looked out over a vista Kate couldn't have imagined from her Brooklyn apartment. The mountains rolled away in every direction, clothed in autumn colors that seemed to shift and change as clouds moved across the sun. Grace had already discovered the swing that hung from a massive oak tree, her laughter carrying across the clearing like music. Sam arrived as promised, bringing fresh bread from town and news that made Kate's stomach tighten with anxiety. "Harrison Blackwell knows you're here," he said without preamble. "Word travels fast in a small community, especially when it concerns Evelyn Thornfield's property." Kate poured coffee from the pot Sam had shown her how to use on the wood-burning stove. "Who is Harrison Blackwell?" "The man who really stole that relief money 60 years ago. His family's controlled this county ever since, built their fortune on the misery of flood victims who never got the help they were promised." Sam's face was grim. Harrison was barely 18 when it happened, but he was smart enough to make Evelyn look guilty while he got away clean. Sam settled into the chair across from Kate, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. "The flood hit the valley on October 15th, 1963. I was fresh back from my first tour overseas, 22 years old, and thought I understood something about devastation. But seeing my hometown underwater, bodies floating past houses where I'd played as a child, that was different." He paused, staring into his coffee as if it held images from that terrible time. Harrison's father owned the bank, his uncle was the mayor, and young Harrison himself was dating the county commissioner's daughter. When the relief committee formed, guess who ended up in charge of distribution? "Harrison," Kate said. "Brilliant boy, too smart for his own good. He set up shell companies, padded administrative costs, charged the fund for services that were never performed. But Evelyn was the treasurer, and she had an accountant's eye for numbers that didn't add up." Grace came running up to the porch, Duke beside her, both breathless from their morning exploration. "Mama, there's a secret path behind the house that goes up to the waterfall." Kate smiled despite the tension in the conversation. "Don't go too far, sweetheart. And stay where Duke can keep up with you." Sam watched Grace disappear around the side of the house, his expression softening. Evelyn would have loved her. She always said this place needed children's laughter. What happened when Evelyn discovered the discrepancies? She went to Harrison directly first, gave him a chance to make things right before going public. Big mistake. Sam's voice hardened. Harrison didn't just threaten her job or reputation. He threatened Thomas, your father. 3 years old at the time, living with Evelyn in a little house down in the valley. The implications hit Kate like a physical blow. He threatened to hurt a child? Worse than threatened. One night, 3 men broke into Evelyn's house. She managed to hide Thomas in a root cellar, but they tore the place apart looking for him. Left a message that next time, they'd find him. Sam stood and walked to the porch railing, looking out over the valley where these events had unfolded decades before. That's when Evelyn made her choice. She couldn't fight Harrison directly. He had too much power, too many connections. But she could protect Thomas and save the money from being stolen. She took the money herself. Every penny, withdrew it from the bank account on October 30th, 1963, and disappeared into these mountains. Left Thomas with her sister Catherine, your grandmother, and let the whole county believe she was a thief rather than risk her son's safety. Kate felt tears she didn't expect building behind her eyes. Her father had grown up believing Catherine Morrison was his mother, never knowing that his real mother lived 20 miles away, watching over him from a distance, protecting him by allowing the world to hate her. Did he ever know? Did my father ever know the truth? Evelyn wrote him letters every year on his birthday, never sent them, but wrote them anyway. They're here somewhere, along with everything else she saved. Sam turned back to Kate, his expression gentle but serious. She loved that boy more than life itself. Giving him up nearly killed her, but keeping him would have killed them both. Over the next few days, Kate settled into the rhythm of mountain life with surprising ease. The silence that had felt oppressive in Brooklyn became restorative here, broken only by the sounds of wind through pines and the distant call of hawks circling overhead. Grace adapted even more quickly, transforming from the anxious city child who'd watched her parents' marriage crumble into a confident explorer who climbed trees and built fairy houses from moss and twigs. It was during one of Grace's explorations that she made the discovery that would change everything. "Mama, come quick!" Grace's voice carried across the clearing, high and excited. "I found something really weird." Kate followed the sound to find Grace and Duke standing beside the cliff face behind the house, where a spring bubbled up from the rocks to form a small creek. Grace was pointing at what looked like a natural formation in the stone, but on closer examination revealed itself to be carefully constructed stonework camouflaged to blend with the cliff. "It's like a secret door," Grace said, running her hands along the edges. "And look, there are symbols carved here." Kate examined the markings, not random scratches, but deliberate symbols that matched drawings she'd seen in Evelyn's journals. When she pressed the largest symbol, a section of the stone wall swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow cave that had been enlarged and reinforced with timber supports. Inside, battery-powered lanterns still held their charge after all these years. The cave contained filing cabinets, wooden crates, and a small desk covered with maps and documents. But it was the wall that took Kate's breath away, covered from floor to ceiling with photographs, newspaper clippings, property records, and handwritten notes connected by colored string like a detective's investigation board. In the center of it all was a map of the county with properties marked in red. Every piece of land the Blackwell family had acquired in the years following the flood, often at prices far below their actual value from families desperate to rebuild. "She was building a case," Kate whispered, understanding flooding through her. "For 60 years, she was gathering evidence." Grace found the financial records in a fireproof safe hidden behind a false wall of rock. Bank statements, canceled checks, receipts, all meticulously organized and cross-referenced. The trail of stolen money was laid out like a roadmap, showing exactly how Harrison Blackwell had diverted disaster relief funds into his own accounts and used them to build the empire that still controlled the county. Most damning of all was a thick folder labeled insurance claims. Harrison hadn't just stolen the relief money, he'd also filed fraudulent insurance claims on properties that had been minimally damaged, then used both the relief funds and the insurance payouts to buy land from victims who'd received nothing. Before we continue with Kate's discovery, I have to ask, where are you listening to this story right now? Are you at home with a cup of coffee, taking a walk, or maybe doing some household tasks? There's something special about sharing these moments together, no matter where we are. If this story is keeping you company today, please let me know in the comments and consider subscribing for more stories that celebrate courage and family bonds. Kate was so absorbed in the documents that she didn't hear the vehicles approaching until Duke began barking frantically. Through the cave opening, she could see two black SUVs parked in front of the house. Men in expensive suits were walking around the property, testing doors and windows with the confidence of people who believed they had every right to be there. She grabbed the most important documents and stuffed them into a backpack, then led Grace deeper into the cave system. The natural passages extended far into the mountain, and Evelyn had clearly explored them thoroughly. Battery-powered lights marked safe paths, and emergency supplies were cached at regular intervals. They emerged through a hidden entrance nearly half a mile from the house, behind a screen of rhododendron bushes that concealed the opening. From there, Kate could see the intruders more clearly. 5 men, all carrying what looked like professional equipment. Not burglars, but a search team. Kate's phone had no signal, but she remembered Sam mentioning that reception was better from the higher elevations. She led Grace up a steep trail that switched back toward the mountain summit. Duke struggling, but determined to keep up despite his age. The call connected just as storm clouds began building over the western peaks. Sam answered on the first ring. "Kate, where are you?" "There are men at the house," she said breathlessly. 5 of them, going through everything. We're hiding in the woods, but Grace is getting scared and Duke can barely walk. "Stay where you are. I'm coming with help." While they waited, huddled under an overhang, as the first fat raindrops began to fall, Kate tried to explain to Grace what was happening without frightening her further. But her daughter was braver than she'd expected. "They're looking for the evidence, aren't they?" Grace said matter-of-factly. "The papers that proved the bad man stole the money." Kate nodded, impressed by her daughter's grasp of the situation. "Then we can't let them find it," Grace continued. "Great-grandmother Evelyn kept it safe for 60 years. Now it's our turn." The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke just as Sam arrived with 3 other men. Kate recognized them as veterans from their bearing, the way they moved together with practiced coordination, the calm assessment of the tactical situation, the quiet confidence that came from having faced worse threats in darker places. But as they prepared to approach the house, Grace suddenly grabbed Kate's arm. "Duke!" she cried. "Where's Duke?" In the confusion of hiding and calling for help, none of them had noticed the old dog wandering off. Kate's heart clenched as she realized he was probably trying to return to the house, the only real home he'd known since they'd arrived. "I have to find him," Grace said, already starting down the trail. "Absolutely not," Kate caught her daughter's hand. "It's too dangerous. But he's old and scared and he doesn't understand what's happening." Tears streamed down Grace's face. "I can't just leave him." The search for Duke in the growing storm became the most terrifying hour of Kate's life. The rain turned the mountain trails treacherous, and Grace, despite promising to stay close, seemed to vanish into the forest like a spirit. Kate followed the sound of her daughter's voice calling Duke's name, but the storm made it impossible to judge direction or distance. Thunder rolled across the mountains like artillery fire, and lightning split the sky in jagged white scars. The creek that had been a gentle murmur that morning became a roaring torrent that threatened to overflow its banks. Kate's city shoes provided no traction on the slippery rocks and muddy trails, and more than once she found herself sliding down embankments, branches tearing at her clothes and face. "Grace!" she called until her voice was hoarse, but the wind seemed to snatch her words away before they could travel more than a few feet. "Grace, please answer me." It was Sam who found them first. Grace and Duke huddled together under a rocky overhang near the swollen creek, both soaked and shivering but safe. Grace had her arms wrapped around the old dog, who looked up at Kate with the patient expression of a creature who trusted his humans to handle whatever crisis had arisen. "I couldn't leave him," Grace said through chattering teeth. "He's family." Sam lifted Grace onto his shoulders while Kate helped Duke navigate the treacherous path back to higher ground. The old retriever's legs trembled with exhaustion and cold, but he pressed on with the determination of a dog who understood that his pack depended on him. As a mother myself, that scene with Grace and Duke in the storm just breaks my heart every time. Have you ever had a moment where you had to be braver than you thought possible for someone you love? These are the moments that define us, aren't they? Share your thoughts below. And if you have someone in your life who would love Kate and Grace's story, please share this video with them. As they made their way back toward the house, Sam's radio crackled with updates from his friends. The intruders had left, apparently empty-handed, but not before ransacking the house and leaving behind a clear message. A photograph of Grace getting on the school bus, taken that very morning. Kate stared at the image, fury and fear warring in her chest. These people had threatened her child. Whatever price Evelyn had paid for standing up to corruption, Kate was suddenly willing to pay it too. "We're calling the authorities," she said firmly. "Local authorities won't help," Sam warned. "Sheriff's department, county attorney, most of the town council, they're all in Harrison's pocket or too scared to cross him. Then we go over their heads. Federal authorities, state police, journalists who aren't afraid of small-town politics." Kate's voice carried a steel that surprised even her. "It's time to finish what Evelyn started." The next week passed in a whirlwind of careful preparation. Kate's background as a librarian proved invaluable. She knew how to research, how to organize information, how to build an unassailable case from scattered documents. Sam's network of veterans provided security and practical support, while his contacts in state government helped identify the right people to approach with their evidence. Grace became Kate's unofficial assistant, helping organize documents with the methodical precision she'd inherited from both sides of her family. She also provided something Kate hadn't expected, a child's clarity about right and wrong that cut through the complex justifications adults use to avoid difficult choices. "Why didn't anyone help great-grandmother Evelyn back then?" Grace asked one evening as they sorted through financial records. "Because standing up to powerful people is scary," Kate said honestly, "and sometimes the cost seems too high." But the cost of not standing up was higher, wasn't it? All those families who never got help, all those years great-grandmother had to live alone, all the bad things that kept happening because nobody stopped them. Kate paused in her sorting, struck by the wisdom in her daughter's observation. "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes the cost of silence is much higher than the cost of speaking truth." The confrontation Kate had been both dreading and anticipating came on a crisp October morning when Grace was at her new school in town. Kate was alone at the house, uploading scanned documents to secure servers, when she heard the distinctive sound of expensive vehicles climbing the mountain road. This time it wasn't a covert operation. Harrison Blackwell himself emerged from a black Lincoln, followed by his son Marcus and three men who carried themselves with the casual menace of professional intimidators. Harrison moved with the careful dignity of extreme old age, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating as they surveyed the property he'd been trying to acquire for decades. "Ms. Morrison," Harrison's voice carried the honey-smooth tones of a politician, but underneath lay something harder. "I believe we need to have a conversation." Kate stepped onto the porch, grateful for the solid wood beneath her feet and the knowledge that Sam and his friends were positioned at strategic points around the property. "I'm listening, Mr. Blackwell." "I think there's been a misunderstanding about your inheritance. You see, this property has a complicated history. Your predecessor wasn't entirely forthcoming about certain legal obligations that come with ownership." Marcus stepped forward with a briefcase full of documents. "There are outstanding liens, environmental compliance issues, questions about the original deed. The legal costs alone could bankrupt you, and that's before we consider the safety concerns." "What safety concerns?" Kate asked, though she suspected she already knew. Harrison's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew colder. "The mountains can be dangerous, especially for people who don't understand local conditions. Accidents happen so easily. Rock slides, flash floods, getting lost in the wilderness. Tragic, but unfortunately common." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a forest fire. Kate thought of Evelyn, facing the same kind of pressure 60 years ago, and of Grace, whose future depended on the choice Kate made right now. "Are you threatening my daughter, Mr. Blackwell?" "I'm simply pointing out realities that any responsible parent would consider. Of course, all of these concerns could be resolved if you were willing to sell the property to someone with the resources to handle them properly. Before Kate could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching at high speed echoed up the mountain road. But instead of more Blackwell reinforcements, 3 unmarked sedans appeared, followed by a van with federal license plates. Agents emerged with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. The lead agent, a woman with steel gray hair and a face that revealed nothing, approached the group on the porch with her credentials already displayed. FBI, she announced. I'm Special Agent Patricia Williams. Mr. Blackwell, you're under arrest for federal fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering in connection with the misappropriation of federal disaster relief funds. Harrison's composure finally cracked. This is outrageous. I'm a respected member of this community. My family has contributed more to this county than anyone alive. Your family built their fortune on stolen money and other people's suffering. Agent Williams replied without emotion. We have 60 years of documented evidence, thanks to the meticulous records kept by Evelyn Thornfield and provided by Ms. Morrison. As federal agents led Harrison away in handcuffs, Marcus Blackwell stood frozen on the porch, watching his family's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. I knew, he said quietly to Kate. I've known for years what my father did. I told myself it was ancient history, that the people who were hurt were gone, that bringing it up now would only cause more pain. He handed Kate a manila envelope. These are the documents my father thought he destroyed, the original relief fund records, the real property transfers, evidence of the murders made to look like accidents when people got too close to the truth. Kate took the envelope with hands that trembled slightly. Why now? Why give this to me? Because I have a daughter Grace's age, Marcus said simply, and I want her to grow up in a world where standing up for what's right actually matters. The federal investigation that followed made national news, not just because of the scope of the corruption, but because of the human story at its heart. A woman who had sacrificed everything to protect stolen money from those who would misuse it, and a granddaughter who had finally brought that story into the light. Kate found herself at the center of a media storm she'd never imagined, telling Evelyn's story to journalists who understood that this was bigger than small-town politics. The relief fund money, carefully invested by Evelyn over 6 decades, had grown to nearly $3 million. Kate established the Evelyn Thornfield Foundation, providing disaster relief and educational support throughout Central Virginia. More importantly, the Blackwell investigation opened doors to examine other cases of disaster profiteering around the country. Evelyn's meticulous documentation became a template for investigating similar crimes, her sacrifice finally bearing fruit on a scale she could never have imagined. But for Kate, the most profound changes were personal. The frightened woman who had fled Brooklyn with nothing but debt and desperation had become someone who understood that real strength came not from avoiding difficult choices, but from making them with full knowledge of their cost. Grace thrived in her new environment, forming friendships with local children who accepted her city background as just another interesting fact about their new classmate. She helped Kate organize the foundation's work with the same methodical precision she'd brought to sorting evidence, already showing signs of the Morrison family's capacity for detailed documentation and quiet persistence. Sam's presence in their lives deepened gradually, not through romantic urgency, but with the patient development of trust and mutual respect that comes when two people have survived crisis together. He taught Grace about mountain ecology and practical skills while sharing stories of the grandmother she'd never known, but whose courage she'd clearly inherited. On a clear November morning, exactly 1 month after Harrison Blackwell's arrest, Kate stood on her porch watching Grace and Sam work together to build a better chicken coop for the small flock they'd acquired. Duke supervised from a sunny spot on the deck, his arthritis improved by mountain air and the absence of stress. The sound of a car engine climbing the mountain road no longer filled Kate with anxiety. This time it brought Rebecca Chen, the journalist whose investigation had helped bring federal attention to the case. She'd driven up from Richmond to interview Kate for a book about Evelyn's life and the broader implications of the Blackwell case. "How does it feel?" Rebecca asked over coffee at the kitchen table. "To know that your grandmother's sacrifice wasn't in vain?" Kate considered the question, looking out at the mountains that had sheltered Evelyn's secrets and her own family's new beginning. "I think she knew it wouldn't be. I think she understood that truth has its own timeline, and that justice delayed isn't always justice denied." She paused, watching Grace demonstrate her improved tree-climbing skills to an audience of chickens and one patient dog. "The hardest part is realizing how much she gave up. She could have had this: family dinners, bedtime stories, teaching her granddaughter to fish in the creek. But she chose to protect something larger than her own happiness. Do you think she was right to make that choice?" Kate touched the letter that lay on the table between them, one of the unsent birthday messages Evelyn had written to Thomas over the years. This one, written on his 16th birthday, spoke of love that required distance and hope that someday truth would find its way into the light. "I think she did what she could with the choices available to her," Kate said finally. "And I think she trusted that someday someone would come along who had access to different choices." As winter settled over Willowbrook Mountain, the house that had once sheltered secrets became a place of healing and new growth. Kate converted part of the main floor into office space for the foundation, while the cave system became a secure archive for historical documents about disaster recovery and community resilience. The foundation's first major project was establishing a disaster preparedness center in the valley, built on land donated by Marcus Blackwell as part of his family's attempt to make amends. The center provided emergency supplies, coordination services, and, most importantly, transparent financial oversight that ensured relief funds reached the people who needed them most. Grace appointed herself junior archivist, helping Kate organize Evelyn's massive collection of documents and photographs. She also began her own documentation project, interviewing elderly residents about their memories of the 1963 flood and its aftermath. Her natural empathy and genuine curiosity helped people share stories they'd kept buried for decades. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell soft and silent over the mountains, Kate sat by the fireplace reading one of Evelyn's unsent letters to her father. Sam was in the kitchen, teaching Grace how to make mountain apple cake from a recipe his grandmother had taught him. The sound of their laughter mingled with the crackling fire and Duke's contented snoring. The letter spoke of love that required sacrifice, hope that survived disappointment, and faith that justice would eventually emerge from the shadows where it had been hidden. Evelyn had died before seeing her vindication, but she had lived long enough to ensure it would come. Kate folded the letter and placed it with the others in a box she was preparing for Grace, to be opened when her daughter turned 18 and could fully understand the legacy of courage and principle she'd inherited. Outside, the mountain stood eternal and protective, holding its stories with the patient wisdom of stone and forest. Inside, 3 generations of love and loss and hard-won justice settled into the peace that comes when truth finally has room to breathe. Sam appeared beside her chair, carrying 2 cups of hot cider and wearing the smile that had become as essential to Kate's days as coffee and sunlight. Behind him, Grace carefully balanced a plate of warm cake, her face glowing with the satisfaction of mastered skills and shared accomplishment. "Mama," Grace said, settling cross-legged on the hearth rug beside Duke, "do you think great-grandmother Evelyn can see us now?" Kate looked around at the life they'd built in this place. Not perfect, not without challenges, but honest and rooted in values that could weather whatever storms might come. "I think she's been watching over us all along, sweetheart, and I think she's proud of what we've become." Grace nodded solemnly, then brightened. "I want to write her a letter, not to send anywhere, but just to tell her about our life here, about how Sam taught me to identify bird calls, and how Duke finally learned to use the dog door, and how the foundation helped the Morrison family rebuild after their house fire." I think that's a beautiful idea, Kate said, thinking of all the unsent letters that had connected Evelyn to the family she'd had to watch from afar. As Grace settled at the kitchen table with paper and pencil, Sam joined Kate by the fire. Neither of them spoke the words they weren't quite ready for, but both understood that some kinds of love grew strong precisely because they were allowed to develop naturally, without pressure or timeline or anything, except the daily choice to build something lasting together. The mountain held them all, past, present, and future, in its ancient embrace. As snow continued to fall and Grace continued to write, and Kate continued to learn that the best stories were the ones you lived rather than read, the ones that taught you who you really were when everything else had been stripped away. 6 months later, when spring transformed the mountainside into a symphony of wildflowers and new growth, Kate stood before a crowd of reporters and community leaders for the official opening of the Evelyn Thornfield Memorial Center. The building rose from the exact spot where Evelyn's original house had stood before Harrison's men burned it down in 1963, and its cornerstone contained a time capsule filled with letters from flood survivors and their descendants. Grace, now 11 and taller by several inches, helped Kate unveil the bronze plaque that told Evelyn's true story. As applause echoed across the valley, Kate thought she felt a gentle touch on her shoulder, not ghostly but warm, like the blessing of a woman whose faith in ultimate justice had finally been vindicated. Harrison Blackwell died in federal prison 6 months into his sentence, unrepentant to the end. Marcus Blackwell continued his work to make amends, establishing a scholarship fund and working with federal investigators to uncover similar schemes in other disaster-prone regions. But for Kate, the most meaningful transformation was in the simple rhythms of daily life. She woke each morning to mountain sunlight streaming through windows that looked out over a vista of healing and hope. Grace thrived in her mountain school, her city sophistication balanced by the practical skills Sam taught her and the historical consciousness she'd inherited from Evelyn. And in the quiet moments, watching Sam teach Grace to fish in the creek, listening to Duke's contented sighs as he dozed by the fire, feeling the deep peace that came from finally understanding her place in the world, Kate knew that sometimes the hardest roads led to the most beautiful destinations. The legacy of Willowbrook Mountain wasn't just property or money or even justice, though it encompassed all of those things. It was the understanding that some truths are worth any sacrifice required to preserve them, and that courage, once awakened, could echo across generations to inspire others to stand firm when their own time of testing came. As evening settled over the mountains, Kate sat on her porch with Sam and Grace, watching fireflies begin their ancient dance in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate, and the creek sang its eternal song of water, returning always to the sea. They were home, in every sense that mattered, in a place where love had room to grow and truth had finally found its voice.